She stepped onto the stage, opened her mouth to sing, and nothing came out. The crowd began to murmur. The judges looked away. Then a man stood up from the back of the room. It was Keanu Reeves. What he did next silenced everyone and changed her life forever. Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. The wooden floor of the Oak Ridge High School auditorium creaked under the pressure of folding chairs being set into rows. Maroon banners hung from the rafters, slightly faded by years of stage lights proudly reading Annual Oak Ridge Talent Showcase. The smell of popcorn drifted from the concession stand near the gym entrance, mixing with the faint tang of floor polish. In this quiet Texas town, Friday night meant two things: football and talent night. Tonight, the bleachers had been pushed back and replaced with rows of folding chairs, all aimed at a makeshift stage flanked by twinkling fairy lights. Backstage, 17-year-old Jenna Carter stood motionless near the dressing room mirror, her palms clammy and her heart galloping. Her light brown hair was pulled into a soft braid that trembled every time her shoulders did. Dressed in a long navy blue dress with short sleeves and a floral hem, she looked like she belonged on a stage. But every fiber of her being screamed otherwise. She clutched a crumpled note card in her right hand. On it, 3 words were written in capital letters: "You can sing," a reminder from her music therapist, Mrs. Langley. For months, Jenna had been working on her anxiety. Therapy sessions filled with breathing exercises, journaling, humming in front of a mirror. Tonight was supposed to be a breakthrough, a way to step through the door she had always kept shut. She had signed up for the show weeks ago in a moment of unexpected bravery after Mrs. Langley suggested performing could help rewire her fears. It's not about singing in front of people, she had said. It's about proving to yourself that you're stronger than the fear. Jenna believed her, or at least she had tried to. Now, as the echo of laughter and clapping rolled backstage after each performance, Jenna wished she could vanish. Her stomach turned every time the MC called another name. Guitar players, magicians, dancers. One by one, they stepped on stage. One by one, they finished their acts and returned to their seats. Meanwhile, Jenna remained near the curtain, frozen. Her parents sat in the 3rd row from the front, holding hands tightly. Her mother, Claire, kept glancing toward the side of the stage, where she knew Jenna would eventually emerge. Her father, David, gave her hand a squeeze each time another act finished. They weren't sure this was the right thing, but they trusted Jenna's decision. They had seen the way music changed her, how singing in the privacy of her bedroom softened the sharp edge of panic attacks. They just didn't know if it would work out here. Not under lights, not in front of strangers. Out in the audience near the back row, a man wearing a gray beanie denim jacket and black boots slid quietly into a seat. A few people glanced his way, unsure if they recognized him. He kept his head low and gave a small nod to the elderly woman seated beside him. Her name was Evelyn Moore, and she was one of the judges. Evelyn Moore adjusted her glasses and leaned toward Keanu Reeves with a warm smile. "Thank you for coming, dear. I know this isn't exactly Hollywood, but these kids, they put their hearts on this stage." Keanu gave a soft chuckle. "That's exactly why I came, Evelyn." He kept his voice low. Most people hadn't noticed him yet. That's how he preferred it. He wasn't here to be seen. He was here because Evelyn had once been his literature teacher in high school, decades ago, back when he was just a quiet teenager, scribbling poetry in the back of the classroom. When she called last month, telling him she was helping organize a small-town talent show, and jokingly asked if he wanted to come support the kids, he said yes without hesitation. Now, tucked into the crowd of parents and neighbors, Keanu watched as a young boy juggled glow-in-the-dark pins to roaring applause. His eyes scanned the edge of the curtain, where he noticed a girl standing too still, stiff with tension. She looked terrified. He recognized the kind of fear that sat in the chest like a storm cloud. Backstage, Jenna's legs felt numb. She had rehearsed this moment countless times in her room, singing into a hairbrush, imagining a forgiving audience. But this was real. The lights, the waiting crowd, the steady tick of the clock backstage. Her throat tightened as the MC walked past her and whispered, "You're up next, sweetheart." Her vision blurred, her chest rose and fell too quickly. She pressed her back against the wall, trying to remember the breathing techniques Mrs. Langley taught her. Inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4, exhale for 6. She tried, but nothing slowed her racing heart. She pulled out the crumpled note card again. You can sing, but what if she couldn't? The performer before her exited stage, right holding a paper certificate and smiling. Jenna tried to smile back, but her lips wouldn't move. The MC tapped her shoulder gently. Ready? Jenna stepped forward, knees shaking. The stage was awash of yellow light. A single mic stood center stage. She walked toward it, her shoes clicking softly against the wooden floor. The audience clapped politely, unaware of the battle raging inside her. Keanu leaned forward in his seat. Something in her posture, tight, fragile, caught his attention. Evelyn tilted her head. That's Jenna Carter. I heard she's got the voice of an angel, but she's never performed before. Keanu kept watching. Jenna reached the mic stand. She opened her mouth to sing, and nothing came out. The auditorium, moments ago, buzzing with soft chatter, and movement hushed. Jenna's eyes widened. Her lips trembled. The silence grew heavier. Someone in the back let out a small cough. Another voice whispered, "What's going on?" She turned slightly to look at the side of the stage where the curtains swayed gently. She wanted to run. Jenna gripped the microphone tighter, her fingers turning pale. Her breath came in shallow waves. The words of the song she had rehearsed over and over had vanished from her mind like a dream slipping away after waking. Her eyes darted across the rows of faces, some curious, some blank, some already beginning to look down at their phones. A low ripple of murmurs started to roll across the audience. One of the judges raised an eyebrow and leaned toward another. A girl in the front row stifled a nervous laugh, not out of cruelty, but the awkwardness of the moment was starting to weigh on everyone. Jenna blinked rapidly, her body paralyzed, her thoughts spiraling. The walls seemed to close in. She could feel the heat of the spotlight on her skin, making her sweat despite the auditorium's cool air. Her chest tightened, as if ropes were being pulled around her ribs. She stepped back from the mic. From the third row, her mother stood halfway up, instinctively ready to go to her daughter, but her father placed a steadying hand on her arm. His eyes locked on Jenna, his heart breaking silently. Backstage, the MC took a slow step forward, unsure whether to intervene. Keanu stood up. The movement was small, almost quiet, but it sent a subtle shockwave through the room. Heads turned, a hush fell over the whispers. In that moment, more than a few people recognized him, not from the posters or the action films, but from the way he carried himself. Calm, present, unshaken by the awkward silence. Evelyn looked at him, eyes narrowing in curiosity. "What are you doing, Keanu?" He didn't answer. He just began to walk down the side aisle toward the stage. The murmuring in the crowd grew louder. Someone gasped. "Is that—" "No way. That's Keanu Reeves." He moved with purpose but not urgency. Each step was measured. His boots echoed softly across the floor. Jenna was too deep in panic to even notice him at first. The MC stepped forward to intercept him, startled, but Keanu leaned in and whispered something only he could hear. "Let me play bass for her." The MC blinked. "You." What Keanu gave a small nod toward the corner of the stage, where a set of instruments had been left behind by an earlier performer, a drum kit, an unplugged bass guitar, a stool, and a small amp. "I think she just needs something steady to hold on to." The MC hesitated, then slowly nodded, stepping aside. Keanu walked past him and gently picked up the bass guitar. He plugged the cable into the amp with practiced hands, adjusted the strap, and sat on the stool. The audience was dead silent now, hanging on the surreal tension of the moment. Jenna finally looked up and saw him there. He met her eyes, gave her the smallest, calmest smile, and plucked a single note. Low, warm, familiar. The opening rhythm of "Stand By Me." Slow, steady, patient. Jenna's lips parted. Her knees wobbled, but she didn't run. She listened. The moment Jenna stepped into the spotlight, the warmth of the stage lights hit her face like a sudden wave. She squinted, instinctively disoriented by the brightness. The auditorium dim beyond the stage looked like a sea of shadows and blurred faces. She couldn't see individual people, just the outlines of dozens of heads turned in her direction. She stopped at the microphone and adjusted it slightly with trembling hands. The stand wobbled from her grip, and she felt her face flush as she tried to steady it without drawing more attention. A soft squeal from the mic echoed across the room. A few people chuckled, not loudly, just enough for her to hear. She took a deep breath, trying to summon the first note. But nothing came. Her throat felt tight, like it had sealed shut. Her lungs refused to draw in the air she needed. Her fingers curled into fists at her sides, hidden by the flowing skirt of her dress. Her heart pounded so loudly she could hear it in her ears. It wasn't supposed to be like this. She had practiced. She knew this song inside out. But now her mind was blank and fear had taken hold. She glanced down at the floor. The wooden boards of the stage blurred through the tears welling in her eyes. Somewhere in the crowd, someone shifted in their seat. Another person coughed. The silence stretched longer. A girl in the second row leaned over to whisper to her friend. The whisper wasn't cruel, but Jenna saw the movement and assumed the worst. Her mind raced with imagined criticism. What is she doing up there? She can't even start. Why would she sign up if she's not ready? Jenna's chest tightened further. She looked out again, this time, searching for her parents. Her mother's face was frozen in a tense, hopeful smile. Her father nodded slightly, trying to encourage her from afar, but it wasn't enough to hold her together. One of the judges, a man in a beige suit with silver-rimmed glasses, glanced at his watch, tapping the face twice. Another judge, a woman with tightly coiled blonde hair and a clipboard resting in her lap, let out a quiet sigh and scribbled something onto her sheet. Jenna couldn't read what she wrote, but she imagined it said disqualified. She opened her mouth again. Still no sound. The silence wasn't just awkward, now it was suffocating. Jenna's hands shook as she lifted the microphone. The weight of it felt enormous, like holding a brick in her hands. She tried again. A breath, a word, anything. But the sound caught in her throat and vanished. She couldn't do it. Her lower lip quivered, her shoulders hunched forward in defeat. And slowly, as if moving through water, Jenna took a step back from the microphone. Her right hand reached up to brush a strand of hair behind her ear, trying to keep herself composed. But her body betrayed her. She turned slightly toward the curtain, toward escape. She didn't realize she was crying until she felt the warmth of a single tear slide down her cheek. Jenna blinked hard, trying to stop the rest from following, but it was too late. The sting in her throat had nothing to do with the song and everything to do with the feeling of failure closing in around her. The audience remained quiet, unsure whether to applaud to wait or to look away. Some people exchanged uncomfortable glances. A few parents shifted in their seats. The tension in the room was no longer about anticipation, it was discomfort. From the edge of the stage, the MC took a step forward, ready to gently guide her off stage. He'd seen nerves before, even stage fright, but this was something deeper. Jenna looked frozen, like a bird trapped in a room full of windows it couldn't fly through. The judge with the clipboard leaned in to whisper to the head judge, her pen still moving. "She's not going to do it," she murmured. "I know," the other replied, barely above a breath. Jenna's fingers clutched at her dress. She turned her body fully toward the curtain, her foot hovering for a moment, as if even her limbs were begging her not to move. But her mind had already decided. She couldn't do it. She wasn't strong enough. She would leave the stage and disappear into the back hallway, where she could collapse in private, where no one would see her fall apart. A few rows back, a girl about Jenna's age leaned toward her mother and whispered, "I feel so bad for her." Her mother nodded, her voice low. "Poor thing. She looks terrified." Keanu watched all of it unfold from his seat near the back. His eyes didn't flicker. He didn't shift in his chair or glance at his phone like others had started to do. He simply watched Jenna as she fought a battle no one else in that auditorium could see. He saw it in the way her shoulders trembled, in the way her left hand stayed clenched while her right hovered in uncertainty. She wasn't just scared, she was drowning. The MC began to walk slowly toward her again, more certain this time that the act was over. Then Jenna stopped moving. She stood still, caught mid-step. She hadn't made it to the curtain yet. The stage light framed her like a frozen statue shadow trailing behind her. Her lips parted again. She looked back at the microphone. Just for a second. The sound of the amp buzzing faintly in the background reminded her of the rehearsals in her room when the only audience was her cat, curled on the bed. A flicker of resistance showed in her eyes, but the moment passed just as quickly. Her head lowered, and her body turned again, fully facing away from the mic now. That was when she heard movement behind her. A chair scraped gently. Someone stood. Jenna didn't know why she turned around. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was the shift in the room's energy. Or maybe it was the silence that suddenly felt less heavy, less like judgment, more like waiting. Her eyes scanned the audience again, only this time something was different. A man was walking toward the stage, calmly, quietly. He wasn't part of the staff. He wasn't one of the judges. And yet, no one stopped him. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone near the front whispered his name, and the sound carried like a breeze through dry leaves. Keanu Reeves. Jenna's mind didn't register the name at first. She was too locked in her own internal storm. But she saw the man, tall, steady, dressed in a denim jacket and boots, approach the side of the stage and speak softly to the MC. She stood frozen, unsure what was happening. Was he about to escort her off stage? Was this some kind of mercy exit? But then the man walked past her, not toward the curtain, toward the instruments. He reached down and picked up the bass guitar resting against the amp from a previous act. With a few smooth motions, he checked the tuning, then plugged in the cord. The amp gave a soft hum as it came to life. Jenna watched confused as he sat down on the low stool at the edge of the stage. His presence didn't feel overpowering. It felt grounding. Keanu looked up at her, not smiling too wide, not drawing attention, just offering a silent gesture of reassurance. He nodded once, like saying, "You're not alone." Then he began to play, a soft, slow, familiar rhythm, the unmistakable pulse of "Stand by me." The notes rolled out deep and warm. Each one was simple, patient, steady. They filled the air, not loud, not flashy, just there, like a heartbeat, like a hand reaching out in the dark. Jenna stood still, eyes locked on him, breath catching again, but not from fear this time, from disbelief. He didn't ask her to sing. He didn't say anything at all. He just played. And somehow, in that quiet defiance of the moment, Jenna felt the fear inside her shift, not vanish, but loosen. The song was one she had sung dozens of times in her room. It was her comfort song, the one she used when the world felt too big. And now this man, this stranger who didn't owe her anything, was playing it for her, not as a performance, but as a gift. Jenna's hands relaxed at her sides. She took one slow step toward the mic. The audience still held its breath. The judges leaned forward. Keanu didn't look up again. He just kept the beat. Jenna's fingers curled lightly around the microphone. She closed her eyes, and this time when she opened her mouth, the first note didn't run away. It came out quiet, shaky, but real. The second Jenna turned toward the curtain, her shoulders slumped in quiet defeat. A chair scraped softly against the gym floor near the back of the auditorium. The sound wasn't loud. In fact, it barely rose above the hush that had overtaken the room. But it was just enough to break the stillness. Just enough to shift every head in the room. A man stood. He didn't rush. He didn't raise his voice or wave his arms. He simply rose from his chair, adjusted the sleeves of his denim jacket, and began walking calmly toward the stage. Whispers rippled through the audience like wind moving through tall grass. "Wait, is that? No way. That's Keanu Reeves. That can't be him, right?" "It is, that's him." The parents in the crowd sat up straighter. A few teens pulled out their phones, hesitant to record. But most didn't move, because something about his presence demanded stillness. Not with power, with presence. Keanu Reeves moved with quiet intent. He didn't glance around for approval. He wasn't seeking attention. He was looking straight ahead at the stage where Jenna Carter was seconds from leaving. His boots thudded gently with each step, echoing softly against the wooden floor and plastic chair legs. On the side of the stage, the MC hesitated. He recognized the face approaching him, though it took a few seconds to fully register the moment. Keanu stepped close and leaned in, speaking low so only the MC could hear. "Let me play bass for her." The MC blinked. You want to... She's not afraid to sing, Keanu said quietly. She just doesn't know someone's behind her. There was no arrogance in his voice, no performance, just calm sincerity. The MC looked toward Jenna, who had paused near the stage curtain, unsure if she should leave or stay. She hadn't seen Keanu yet. All she saw was a crowd waiting for her to fail, or so she believed. The MC took a breath, nodded slowly, and stepped aside. Without another word, Keanu moved toward the instruments set up from earlier in the evening, a small amp, a stool, and a bass guitar that had been used by a student jazz trio just an hour before. It leaned against a black padded case nearly forgotten as the show neared its final act. Keanu crouched down and checked the tuning by ear. He turned one knob gently, then another, and plucked a few muted notes with his fingers. The amp hummed as he flipped the switch. The sound of it powered on, like a pulse, a soft background thrum beneath the silence of the room. He sat on the stool, resting the bass comfortably in his lap. It fit him naturally, as if it belonged there. Jenna finally turned and looked back. Her eyes widened. She saw him, and for a moment she forgot she was afraid. Jenna blinked twice, unsure if her mind was playing tricks on her. Her brain was still swimming in adrenaline and panic. But there he was, sitting at the edge of the stage, cradling the bass guitar like it was an extension of himself. Keanu Reeves, not in a movie, not on a magazine cover, right here, real, calm. He didn't smile in a showy way. He didn't wave or nod dramatically. He simply looked at her, made gentle eye contact, and gave the slightest tilt of his head. It was a small gesture, but it landed like thunder in her chest. He was saying, "It's okay, I'm here." The audience didn't move. Not a single soul interrupted. Even those who didn't recognize him instinctively felt that something important was unfolding. Keanu adjusted his fingers along the fretboard, placed his thumb just right, and plucked the first soft note. It was low, warm, round, familiar. The sound didn't demand attention. It invited it. The first few notes of Stand By Me poured from the amp like the slow turn of a tide. The iconic rhythm was unmistakable, even in its softest form. Jenna froze. This was the song. Her song. The one she sang quietly in her room when she was too anxious to speak to her classmates. The one she used to regulate her breathing during therapy. The one her music therapist, Mrs. Langley, had played on piano the day Jenna finally opened up about her panic attacks. It was the musical version of safety. She looked down at her shaking hands. They weren't clenched anymore. They were open. Her fingers moved gently against the fabric of her dress. Keanu continued the rhythm, eyes on the floor, not demanding anything from her, just holding the space. The MC stepped back, watching from the wings with silent awe. He didn't understand how Keanu knew what song to play, or why Jenna's entire posture was beginning to shift, but it was happening right in front of everyone. The judges stopped writing. One of them placed their pen on the table without a word. Even the woman with the clipboard, who had sighed earlier, leaned forward now with her hand over her mouth, eyes wide. Jenna stepped forward. Just one step, then another. The microphone still stood in the center of the stage, like a quiet challenge. She approached it slowly, as if unsure if it would vanish when she reached out. Her breath was still fast, but not out of fear. It was the kind of breath that comes when someone is standing at the edge of something meaningful. Keanu shifted the rhythm slightly, adding a delicate slide of his fingers. He didn't rush her. He didn't look up again. He simply kept playing. The spotlight caught Jenna's braid as it fell across her shoulder. Her voice hadn't come yet, but she was facing the audience again. She hadn't left. and that changed everything. Jenna reached the microphone and placed one hand gently on its silver frame. Her other hand trembled slightly, but not like before. It wasn't the shaking of collapse, it was the tremor of someone standing back up after falling. Keanu kept the rhythm slow and consistent. The gentle heartbeat of the bass seemed to fill the room with something it hadn't had all night, stillness that wasn't tense. It was patient, encouraging, safe. Jenna lowered her head for a moment. She wasn't ready to look at the crowd, not yet. She didn't need to. She could hear the music. She could feel it moving through the floor beneath her shoes and into her chest. One deep breath, then another. Her lips parted. The first sound was barely above a whisper, almost like an exhale disguised as a note. But it was real. It existed. It didn't run away like before. Keanu adjusted the tone ever so slightly, matching her softness. The audience leaned in, the kind of lean that happens when people aren't told to be quiet. They just know. No one reached for their phones now. No one blinked. The air had changed. This wasn't a performance anymore. It was something else entirely. Jenna's voice came again, this time a little fuller. Still fragile, but with shape. She didn't push it. She didn't try to prove anything. She just let it rise gently, one line at a time. When the night has come and the land is dark, the words carried through the room like light touching water. Imperfect, human, honest. From the third row, Jenna's mother covered her mouth with both hands, her eyes brimming. Her father sat forward, not blinking, afraid he'd miss a single second. Jenna kept her gaze low, eyes half closed, focusing only on the rhythm. She wasn't thinking about the crowd. She wasn't thinking about the judges. She was thinking about the sound, the beat behind her, the warmth of that steady bass line telling her she didn't have to be alone. Keanu never rushed. He gave her space between each verse. He adjusted to her timing. When she faltered on a note, he didn't cover it. He supported it, letting the rhythm hold her up until she found her footing again. And slowly she did. Verse by verse, her voice grew. Not loud, but confident. The judges sat back in their chairs, arms crossed, no longer evaluating, just witnessing. Even Evelyn Moore, sitting beside Keanu's empty chair in the back row, had tears in her eyes. Jenna lifted her head halfway through the chorus. She still didn't look directly at the audience, but she no longer needed to hide, because behind her, Keanu kept playing. And in front of her, no one moved. She wasn't performing anymore. She was healing, one note at a time. Keanu sat on the edge of the stage, one foot planted flat on the wooden floor and the other resting gently on the amp. He held the bass in a natural cradle as if it had been waiting in his hands this entire time. His fingers hovered just above the strings. The stage lights washed across his shoulders, casting a soft silhouette behind him, but he didn't seem to notice. His focus was entirely on Jenna. He gave her one calm look, not urgent, not demanding, just a quiet confirmation that he was ready whenever she was. Then he lowered his gaze to the fretboard and began to play. The first note was rich and deep. It vibrated through the stage floor like a slow heartbeat. The second followed, then the third, each one deliberate, steady, familiar. It was the opening groove to Stand By Me, but played with a softness that invited instead of impressed. There was no showmanship, no flourish, just warmth. The sound filled the room without overwhelming it. The crowd didn't speak. No one shifted in their seats. It was as if the music had carved out a small, sacred space in the air. Jenna heard it immediately. Her body reacted before her mind could catch up. Her breathing, still shallow from panic, began to sink slowly, unevenly at first, with the rhythm. Her fingers flexed around the microphone. The cold metal felt real in her palm now, not like a threat, but like something she could hold on to. She looked at Keanu, stunned. She hadn't expected him to stay. She definitely hadn't expected him to play her song, and yet here he was, giving her exactly what she needed, without a single word. He glanced back up just for a second, a small nod, like a whisper without sound. It was enough. Jenna lowered her eyes to the mic again. Her heart still thudded wildly, but something had shifted. The storm in her chest hadn't passed, but it had found a rhythm to move with. She took one step closer to the stand. The bassline continued, gentle, supportive, unwavering. Her lips parted. Nothing came out. The panic surged again, but this time it didn't drown her, because the music was still there. Jenna closed her eyes for one breath. Her fingers squeezed the mic once, then slowly loosened. Then finally, she found the courage to try. A soft sound came out, barely more than air. A whisper of melody, fragile, tentative, but it was real, and Keanu didn't miss a beat. He stayed locked into the groove, his face calm, hands steady, as if he were holding up a bridge beneath her voice. Jenna tried again. When the night has come. The note wavered, nearly cracked, but it stayed. The words trembled as they left her lips, carried by a voice that didn't yet believe in itself. But it was a beginning. And sometimes that's all it takes. The pulse of the bass wrapped around her like a weighted blanket. Each note landed with intention, offering something solid beneath the shakiness of her breath. Keanu wasn't looking at her anymore. He didn't need to. He simply listened and continued. The groove was his promise. He wasn't going anywhere. Jenna's voice came again, a little clearer this time. And the land is dark. It floated above the bass, not in perfect harmony, not polished, but honest. That honesty resonated more than perfection ever could. There was something raw in her delivery, something that made people lean in without realizing they were doing it. In the back of the auditorium, a few parents wiped their eyes. One of the younger children who had been whispering earlier now sat completely still, hands folded in their lap, eyes fixed on the stage. Jenna opened her eyes. The crowd was still a blur, but this time it didn't scare her. Her eyes drifted down toward Keanu, who subtly shifted the rhythm just a tiny bend in the pattern to support her tempo. It was like he could feel her heartbeat and adapt the song to it. She took another breath and continued. And the moon is the only light we'll see. It came out fuller now, a little stronger, still fragile but more secure. Her voice still had that edge of tremble in it, but something else had joined it, conviction. Jenna's posture straightened slightly. Her shoulders lifted, her spine stopped curling inward. The words weren't being dragged out of her anymore. She was meeting them halfway. Keanu added a soft slide between notes, so gentle it was almost felt more than heard. It didn't draw attention. It simply responded like a conversation without words. In the second row, the judge who had tapped his watch earlier sat perfectly still, his pen forgotten beside his program. The clipboard judge, whose face had been skeptical only minutes ago, now sat with her hand over her chest. There was no smirking now. There were no whispered giggles. Only silence. Jenna took another deep breath. The next line was the one she had always stumbled over in rehearsal. Her therapist had said it was because the words were too personal. They reminded her of what she didn't have when she needed it most, a steady friend, someone who stayed. But now someone was staying. Keanu kept playing. So darlin', darlin'. The words reached out into the auditorium like an open hand. Stand by me. Her voice cracked just a little, but she didn't stop. Not this time. Stand by me, she repeated, her voice gaining strength as if the very act of singing those words invited her to believe them. The room remained absolutely still, not a phone in the air, not a whisper between friends. Just the sound of her voice, moving through the quiet, balanced perfectly on the rhythm of Keanu's bass. He remained in his seat at the edge of the stage, head tilted slightly down, fingers gliding across the strings with effortless grace. His playing didn't overshadow her, it carried her. Each note gave her a place to land like stepping stones across a river she used to think was too wide to cross. She gripped the microphone a little tighter and kept going. If the sky that we look upon should tumble and fall. The melody took shape. Her voice no longer sounded like it was fighting to stay alive. It began to flow, trembling in the way real things do, like wind through the trees or a child's first brave sentence. Her eyes didn't search the crowd for approval anymore. She was lost in the rhythm now, focused on the lyrics, grounded by the pulse behind her. One of the judges leaned forward with elbows on the table, eyes wide as if watching something sacred unfold. From the back row, Evelyn Moore dabbed at her eyes with a folded tissue, whispering to no one in particular, That girl has heart. A child in the front row turned to their father and said softly, "She's really good." "She is," the father replied just above a breath. And Jenna kept singing. The notes weren't always perfect. Some wavered, some pushed too hard or too soft, but the imperfections only made it more human, more believable, because what the audience saw wasn't a performance, it was a transformation. Jenna didn't know where the courage was coming from. Every time she felt like she might lose control, she heard that bass line behind her steady grounding, like a friend walking beside her in the dark. She didn't have to be perfect. She just had to stay with the rhythm. "So darlin', darlin', stand by me." This time her voice soared a little higher. She pushed from her diaphragm the way her therapist taught her. It wasn't about volume, it was about belief. Keanu raised his head slightly. He didn't smile. He didn't move much at all. But the slight lift of his brow said everything. She was doing it. She was meeting the moment. Jenna closed her eyes for the final line of the chorus. Her voice rang out clear, full, and completely hers. "Stand by me." Then silence, not from failure, not from fear, but from awe. And then the first person stood, applauding, followed by another and another. But Jenna didn't see them. She opened her eyes and looked only at Keanu. He nodded once more, then let the final note fade. The bass line held steady, like a lighthouse rhythm in the middle of deep, dark water. Keanu's hands moved with complete control. No flare, no spotlight, just warmth. Each note seemed to tell Jenna the same thing over and over. "You're safe. Keep going." Jenna's voice, once fragile, was beginning to steady. It still shook around the edges, but something inside her had clicked. The first chorus had come out in pieces like scattered light. Now, as she started the second verse, her voice returned with clearer intent. "If the sky that we look upon," the line emerged with gentle power, still soft but whole. People in the audience leaned forward, their focus sharpening as the transformation unfolded. They weren't hearing a polished singer. Now they were witnessing someone fight through fear and choose courage, one note at a time. It was raw, and that made it magnetic. The judge, who had tapped his watch earlier, let his arm fall into his lap. His pen dangled from his fingers, forgotten. He watched without blinking eyes, tracing Jenna's posture, how her shoulders no longer curled inward, how her chin lifted with each new line. Jenna glanced toward Keanu again. He wasn't looking up. He didn't need to. His focus was on the strings. He adjusted. Nothing changed, nothing. He just played. It was that steady beat that gave her something to trust. Her mind wasn't racing anymore. The crowd had faded. The fear hadn't vanished, but it no longer controlled her. Now it sat in the back row of her thoughts, quiet, as her voice led the way. Should tumble and fall. The note held. It didn't wobble. Her chest opened with the breath that followed her hand steadying on the microphone. Her fingers no longer clenched or shook. They just rested. Her eyes stayed mostly downward, but she was no longer trying to disappear. She was just focused, grounded, present. The girl in the third row, who had earlier whispered to her mom, now sat with both hands clasped beneath her chin, eyes wide. A man in the back lowered his phone, realizing this wasn't something he wanted to view through a screen. It was quiet but not empty. The quiet now was reverent. Keanu added a subtle slide between notes again, like guiding her up a staircase she couldn't see. He didn't need applause. He didn't need recognition. He was there for her. A stranger who had stepped into her silence and refused to let her be swallowed by it. Jenna felt it every time the vibration of the bass rose through the floor into her feet. It told her, "You're not alone. So, darlin', darlin', stand by me." The second chorus rose, this time stronger, fuller. Her voice filled more space, like a balloon expanding with steady air. There was weight in it now, emotion, memory, something that belonged to her. The whole room could feel it, and it wasn't done yet. Jenna's voice continued to rise, not just in volume, but in confidence. It wasn't perfect. A few notes wobbled and one line landed just a breath too early, but none of it mattered, Because what filled the auditorium wasn't technical skill, it was courage in motion. It was someone reclaiming a part of themselves they had nearly given up on. She stepped a little closer to the microphone. Her body, once stiff with fear, now moved subtly with the music. A gentle sway, a deeper breath. She wasn't performing for the crowd, she was anchored in the rhythm behind her. Keanu's bassline stayed constant. He had not changed his tempo once. He had built a road and was letting her walk it at her own speed. His hands moved with grace, fingers sliding across the frets, like water following a path it knew well. His eyes remained down, not to hide, but to give her the space to shine. Jenna entered the next verse. If the mountains should crumble to the sea. This time her voice had weight behind it. It didn't just carry the melody, it carried the emotion too. Every word seemed tied to something deeper. The crowd could hear it. Her words weren't abstract lyrics anymore. They were truths. They were wounds that had found sound. The judge in the beige suit, who had once tapped his watch impatiently, now rested his elbows on the table, his face soft with disbelief. The woman with the clipboard lowered her pen to her lap, her jaw slightly open. Even the young stage crew members near the back, who had earlier fidgeted and scrolled their phones, were now still locked in. In the fourth row, Jenna's mother was crying silently, one hand over her heart. Her father had his arm around her shoulders, nodding as if every word Jenna sang was something they had waited years to hear. Jenna's eyes lifted for a moment, just enough to see the blurred shapes of the crowd before her. She didn't look for their approval, she just acknowledged that they were there. Then she looked at Keanu. He gave no signal, no cue, just continued, note after note, steady as the tide. And Jenna smiled, the smallest smile, barely there, but it came with the breath she took before the final chorus. So, darling, darling, she didn't hesitate this time. The note rose easily. Stand by me. The words rang out across the room, filled with color and breath and something that sounded like freedom. Stand by me. A child in the front row stood up first, then another, then a mother. Then, as if pulled by a single heartbeat, the entire auditorium rose to their feet. And Jenna kept singing, her voice unshaken, her hands relaxed, her eyes closed again, not to hide, but to feel it all. The final chorus rose from her chest like a breath she'd been holding her entire life. Stand by me. The words rang with clarity, not just from her voice, but from somewhere deeper. It was no longer about hitting notes. It was about speaking her truth aloud and being heard. Keanu let the final progression ring just a bit longer. His fingers slowed slightly as he released the last note, allowing it to fade into the silence. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He just let her own the moment. Jenna opened her eyes. The spotlight felt different now, no longer a threat, but a light that revealed instead of exposed. Her gaze swept across the crowd, and for the first time she truly saw them. Not as a wall of judgment, but as people standing. Faces open, eyes soft, hands clapping not because of celebrity, not because of pity, but because they had witnessed something human and brave. She lowered the microphone slowly, her fingers barely trembling. Her body felt light, like her feet weren't entirely touching the stage anymore. The applause thundered now. A few people whistled. Others just stood with hands pressed together, eyes wet still processing what they had just seen. Jenna took one step back from the mic, then turned to look at Keanu. He finally raised his eyes and met hers. No grand gesture, no words. Just a small nod. A quiet message. You did it. She gave him a smile. This time, full. Not nervous, not broken. Full. From the back of the auditorium, Evelyn Moore wiped her glasses and whispered to the person beside her, "That girl walked through fire." The MC stepped onto the stage again, but paused halfway, unsure if he should speak yet. The energy in the room was still sacred. He gave Keanu a brief nod of gratitude, then motioned softly toward the crowd, encouraging them to keep the applause going. But they didn't need encouragement. They were clapping not just for a performance, but for a moment that felt larger, than the walls of the auditorium. A moment that would linger. Jenna turned to the audience once more and gave a gentle bow, her braid falling forward over her shoulder. Then something unexpected happened. Before the MC could say a word, a girl from the front row, no older than 10, walked to the edge of the stage and said loudly, "You were amazing." Jenna's breath caught. She smiled again, this time with surprise, then crouched slightly and said, "Thank you." The little girl turned to her mom and whispered, "I want to sing next year." Keanu stood slowly, slinging the bass over his shoulder and walking to the back of the stage. He didn't wave. He didn't speak. He just passed Jenna, giving her a brief touch on the shoulder before stepping off into the shadows. She watched him go, then looked out at the crowd once more and realized they weren't clapping for him. They were clapping for her. The final note drifted into silence, hanging in the air longer than anyone expected. The auditorium remained frozen, as if the entire room had collectively held its breath. Then Jenna lowered the microphone. Her hands, once tight with fear, now trembled with release. A single tear rolled down her cheek before she even realized she was crying. She turned slightly to look at Keanu, her mouth open just enough to say something, but no words came yet. Her shoulders began to shake, not from panic this time, but from the overwhelming wave of emotion crashing through her chest. Relief, gratitude, disbelief, pride. And then she wept. Not loud, not uncontrolled, just quiet sobs that came from somewhere deep and long buried. The kind that only rise when a wall finally crumbles. Keanu, still seated at the edge of the stage with the bass resting across his lap, reached up gently and placed his hand on her shoulder. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't for the crowd. It was steady, reassuring, just like the rhythm he had played for her. She didn't flinch. She nodded slightly, letting the moment be what it was. The audience, still standing, erupted again. Not in the usual polite applause. This was full, uninhibited, emotional. People clapped with both hands and their hearts. Some wiped tears, others smiled through glassy eyes, and everyone in their own way felt a shift. Like they had just witnessed something they couldn't name but wouldn't forget. Jenna stepped back from the mic. The MC moved closer but gave her time. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, sniffled once, then took a small breath as if trying to steady herself. The MC, standing a few feet away, waited for her to speak. Finally, Jenna turned to the crowd, voice still fragile but honest, and said, I almost left." The room went quiet again. She looked down at her feet, then at Keanu, then at the audience. Her lips trembled, but this time it wasn't fear. If it weren't for him, keeping the beat behind me, she said, pausing to inhale through her nose, I would have given up. Her voice cracked slightly, but no one seemed to care. A soft murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. She looked back at Keanu, her eyes filled with tears again, and whispered, "Thank you." Keanu stood slowly, gently setting the bass down on the amp beside him. He looked at her expression, calm and kind, and said only one thing. "Music isn't about showing off," he said softly. "It's about finding yourself." Jenna closed her eyes briefly as if trying to absorb that sentence into her bones. The MC stepped between them now, placing a hand gently on Jenna's shoulder and nodding toward the wings. "You two should take a break," he said warmly. "We've got one last act, but I think everyone already got what they came here for." And with that, he motioned them backstage. Jenna nodded, still wiping the tears from her cheeks, as the MC gently guided her toward the curtain. Her legs felt wobbly beneath her, like her body was just now realizing what had happened. She gave one last glance toward the crowd, still standing, still clapping softly as if they didn't want to break whatever fragile spell had filled the room. Keanu followed behind her, quiet as always, letting her lead the way off the stage. As they slipped through the curtain into the dimmer hallway of the backstage area, the noise of the crowd faded slightly, replaced by a soft hush and the distant hum of the stage lights. A few student volunteers stood nearby, wide-eyed. One of them, a boy holding a clipboard and wearing a headset, stammered "That was amazing. I mean, that was really something." Jenna offered a small smile. She looked like she wanted to speak, but she was still too overwhelmed. Keanu gave the student a quiet nod and said, "She did the hard part." They walked farther down the corridor where the lighting was softer and a row of folding chairs lined the wall. The MC caught up with them and motioned to the seats. "Take 5, both of you," he said. "We've got the last performer setting up now, but there's no rush. The judges are still catching their breath." Jenna sat down slowly, folding her hands in her lap. Her dress pooled around her knees, slightly wrinkled now. Her cheeks were still flushed eyes, red from crying, but she didn't look broken. She looked raw, alive, like someone who had walked through a storm and was just beginning to feel the sunlight again. Keanu remained standing nearby, arms loosely crossed. He didn't speak right away. He gave her the space to breathe. She finally looked up at him. Her voice was quiet. "Why did you do that?" He tilted his head slightly. "You needed a rhythm. I've needed one too." Jenna blinked. "But you didn't even know me." "I didn't have to," he replied gently. "Fear is fear. Doesn't matter whose name it wears." She let out a soft, shaky laugh. Not because anything was funny, but because it was the only way to release the knot still lodged in her chest. Keanu leaned back against the wall and looked out toward the dim light seeping from the edge of the curtain. "I've been in moments like that," he said. "Not on a stage, not always with a mic, but moments where everything in you tells you to run. And the only way through is one note at a time." Jenna looked down at her hands. She rubbed her thumb over her fingertips like she was still feeling the microphone there. "I really was going to walk away," she whispered. "I know," he said, "but you didn't." And for the first time since stepping off stage, she smiled, not out of relief, but out of recognition. She had done it, and now she knew it. Jenna leaned back in the chair, finally allowing her shoulders to relax. The adrenaline still buzzed faintly in her system, but it was slowly being replaced by something steadier, something peaceful, a kind of calm she hadn't felt in years. From down the hallway, the muffled sound of the next act filtered in a duet of acoustic guitars. The notes were light pleasant, but far away. It felt like a different world entirely from the one she had just stepped out of. She turned to Keanu again. "Were you nervous the first time you ever performed?" she asked. He thought for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "Terrified," he admitted. "I once forgot all my lines in a school play and stood frozen in front of 100 people. Thought it would kill me." She blinked. "And now you're... you." "I'm still that kid sometimes," he said with a half smile. "I just learned not to believe the fear so much." Jenna nodded slowly, the weight of his words settling into her. It didn't erase her anxiety, but it did something more powerful. It gave her permission to be human. Just then, the MC returned his clipboard tucked under his arm. "Hey," he said softly. "They're wrapping up the last act now. No pressure, but if you'd like to come back out for final acknowledgments, you're welcome to. Everyone's asking about you." Jenna hesitated. Keanu looked at her not with expectation, but with curiosity. She glanced down at her hands one more time, steadier now. Her voice was still quiet, but certain. "Okay, just for a minute." The three of them walked slowly back toward the curtain. The applause from the final act had ended, and the MC stepped out first to address the audience. "Before we close out tonight's show," he announced, "we want to take a moment to recognize a moment we'll all remember for a long time. So please help me welcome back to the stage, Jenna Carter." The audience burst into applause again. Strong, eager, sincere. Jenna stepped out beside Keanu, blinking into the light, but this time she didn't flinch. She stood there and waved once, her smile gentle, her eyes moist again, but for a different reason now. She wasn't afraid. The MC leaned toward the mic once more. "And of course," he added with a grin, "a special thank you to our surprise guest, who needs no introduction, Mr. Keanu Reeves." The cheers grew louder. A few people who had stayed silent before now clapped with full force, some even shouting thank yous from their seats. Keanu gave a quiet nod and a small wave. He didn't step forward. He didn't take the mic. He let the spotlight stay where it belonged, on her. Jenna looked up at him. "You kept the beat," she whispered. He smiled and said nothing. And somewhere deep inside her, The fear that once lived like a shadow finally took its first step away. Backstage, Jenna sat beside her mother on a small metal bench. The noise of the auditorium had quieted behind the curtain, but she could still feel the energy of the moment lingering in the air. Her dress was slightly wrinkled, her eyes red and puffy, but her breathing had finally slowed. Claire Carter pulled her daughter into a soft hug, brushing strands of hair away from her face. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart," she whispered. Jenna leaned into her mother's shoulder, her face wet again with fresh tears. But these weren't from fear. They were from something else. Something unfamiliar and overwhelming. Something that felt like release. "I didn't think I could do it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was going to walk away." Claire held her tighter. "But you didn't." Jenna nodded, then slowly turned her head to the side. Keanu stood a few feet away, his bass now propped safely in its case. He leaned against the wall hands, in the pockets of his jeans, watching Jenna quietly. He didn't interrupt the moment between mother and daughter. He just waited. Jenna wiped her cheeks, stood up, and walked over to him. For a second, she hesitated, unsure if it was okay. Then, without a word, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. Keanu responded with a gentle embrace, careful and respectful. "Thank you," Jenna said, her voice cracking again. He nodded, pulling back just enough to look her in the eyes. "You found it," he said. "What?" "Your voice." Jenna exhaled shakily and gave a tiny laugh through her tears. It almost stayed buried. Keanu tilted his head. "Mine almost did too. Years ago." She blinked. "You," he smiled faintly. "First time I was in a school play, I froze on stage. Couldn't remember a single line. Everyone laughed. I almost quit." Jenna looked up at him, surprised. "So what happened? I had a friend in the wings," he said. "She was supposed to come on after me, but when she saw me frozen, she just stepped on stage early. Started reading her lines, made it look like I hadn't messed up at all." Jenna's eyes widened. "Did it work?" He nodded. The teacher never even noticed. Afterward, she told me, "Sometimes the best way out is through someone else's courage." Jenna looked down at her feet, her expression softening. "That's what you did tonight," she said. Keanu didn't answer. He didn't need to. He just gave her a quiet smile and stepped aside, allowing the moment to settle. From the far end of the hall, a familiar voice called out, echoing gently down the corridor. "Excuse me," the woman said, walking toward them with slow steps and watery eyes. "Is this where the history was made?" It was Evelyn Moore. Jenna turned toward the sound of the voice. Evelyn Moore stood just beyond the hallway lights, her eyes glistening, a handkerchief clutched in one hand. Her posture was upright but gentle, like a woman who had spent decades commanding classrooms but had learned when to simply observe. Jenna straightened slightly. Mrs. Moore Evelyn smiled warmly as she stepped closer. "You may not remember me, but I remember you. 2 years ago I saw you in the library, tucked in the corner with a notebook. You were humming to yourself so quietly I barely heard it. I said hello and you turned red and didn't say a word." Jenna blushed now, too, caught between embarrassment and awe. I remember." Evelyn nodded. "You've come a long way from that corner." Jenna gave a small shrug. "I almost didn't. I almost ran." Evelyn glanced at Keanu, her smile deepening. "Sometimes the right person shows up at the right moment. But the strength? That's all yours, young lady." Keanu stepped back slightly, giving them space. Evelyn's eyes softened. "You didn't just sing tonight. You changed something in that room. I've been helping with this talent show for over 20 years. I've seen kids win trophies and forget about them by Monday. But what you did, that will stay with people." Jenna's lips parted, caught off guard. "But I didn't even sing that well." "Oh, darling," Evelyn said, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "That's what made it matter. It wasn't perfect. It was real. You sang through fear. That's rare. And the truth is, I think you just taught a whole auditorium that courage doesn't look loud, it looks honest." Jenna's eyes welled up again. She wasn't sure how much more emotion she could hold, but it kept rising wave after wave. Evelyn continued, "I've already had 2 teachers come up to me asking how they can better support students with anxiety next semester. Your voice made a difference before you even finished your last note. Jenna looked down, her hand resting gently over her heart. I didn't think anyone like me could ever be part of something like this. I thought being afraid meant you weren't meant for stages. Evelyn squeezed her shoulder. Sometimes the people who are most afraid are the ones who have the most to say. Keanu finally spoke again, his tone calm and steady. Fear doesn't mean you're not ready. It just means you're about to do something that matters. Jenna breathed in deeply, a full inhale that reached all the way into her stomach. For the first time in a long while, it wasn't forced. It came naturally. She let it out slowly, then looked at both of them. Maybe I wasn't just singing for me. No, Evelyn said softly. You were singing for everyone who's ever stayed silent because they thought no one would understand. And in that quiet hallway, surrounded by 3 generations of experience, Jenna Carter finally felt seen. Jenna sat down again, this time beside Evelyn, her body no longer tight with tension. Her mother stood nearby, watching the 3 of them with quiet wonder, as if trying to memorize every detail of this unlikely moment. I've spent most of my life being afraid of my own voice, Jenna admitted. I thought maybe if I just stayed quiet long enough, people would stop expecting things from me. Evelyn nodded, listening without judgment. But when I was out there, Jenna continued when he started playing, I wasn't thinking about the crowd or the lights. I just kept following the beat, like it was something pulling me out of myself. Keanu leaned his back against the wall again. That's what rhythm does, he said. It gives the fear something steady to move around. You stayed with it. I didn't think I would, Jenna replied. I thought the fear would win. It didn't. Claire said, softly stepping forward and placing a hand on her daughter's shoulder. And you reminded a whole room full of people that it doesn't always have to. Keanu gave a small nod. Fear only wins when you believe it's the whole story, but it never is. There was a moment of silence, not awkward, just full. Then Evelyn stood and looked at Jenna with a seriousness that made the girl sit a little taller. I want you to come speak at the school next month, she said. Not to perform, not to impress, just to talk to students like you, ones who sit at the back of the room and think they'll never be good enough. I want them to see what it looks like when someone chooses courage anyway. Jenna's eyes widened. I don't know if I can do that. I didn't say now, Evelyn replied. I said next month. And when you're ready, it won't be a speech. It'll just be your story. Jenna thought about it. Her first instinct was to shake her head and retreat, but that instinct felt weaker now, smaller. She nodded slowly, not with confidence, but with willingness. I'll try, she said. That's all anyone can ask, Evelyn replied, smiling. The hallway grew quiet again as voices from the auditorium faded out. The show was officially over. Folding chairs were being stacked, families reunited. But in this small corridor behind the stage, something else had begun. Jenna stood, took another full breath, and looked at the empty space where she'd just performed. I don't want this to be the last time I sing, Keanu smiled, arms crossed. It won't be, he said. You've already started. Jenna reached down, grabbed the note card she had kept tucked in her pocket all night, the one that said, You can sing. She looked at it, folded it slowly, and slipped it into her purse. I don't think I need this anymore, she said. And for the first time that night, her voice sounded completely sure. The morning sun filtered through the curtains of Jenna's bedroom as her alarm buzzed softly. She reached out and silenced it with a tired hand. Her body still felt heavy from the emotional weight of the night before, but for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel dread when she opened her eyes. She lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling. Part of her wondered if it had all really happened. The stage, the song, Keanu Reeves playing beside her, the crowd on their feet, the hug from Evelyn. It felt like a dream her mind had crafted out of hope. But when she sat up, she noticed something different. Her phone was buzzing. Not just once. It kept vibrating, screen lighting up again and again. Text after text. Missed calls, notifications piling on top of each other. At first, she thought something was wrong. Then she saw the preview on her lock screen. A message from her friend Lily read, "You're literally everywhere right now. Check YouTube?" Jenna blinked confused and opened the video link that followed. It was a clip from the talent show, already titled in bold white text, "Keanu Reeves helps shy girl sing at talent show. What happens next left everyone in tears." The thumbnail showed her standing at the mic with Keanu sitting on the edge of the stage, bass in hand. She tapped play. There she was, frozen, scared exactly how she remembered. And then the moment where Keanu stood up. The first notes of "Stand By Me," her voice stopping again. The standing ovation, her crying at the end. She covered her mouth as tears sprang to her eyes again. The comments were flying in faster than she could read them. "This is the most human moment I've ever seen on stage. I don't care how famous Keanu is. This girl is the real hero. I saw myself in her. Her voice isn't just beautiful, it's brave." She clicked over to another platform. Twitter was already trending with hashtags like #StandByJenna and #Keanu Keeps the Beat. A short 30-second version of the clip had already racked up over 2 million views in under 12 hours. TikTok was flooded with remixes, voiceovers, and duets of other singers harmonizing with Jenna's performance. Some were vocal coaches reacting with emotional commentary. Others were kids with anxiety disorders stitching the video to share how deeply it resonated with them. Jenna scrolled in disbelief. People weren't just watching, they were connecting. One post read, "I've had panic attacks in classrooms just like she did on that stage. Watching her sing through it made me feel seen." Another, "I haven't sung in public in 3 years. Today, I'm picking up my guitar again." The story wasn't about celebrity. It wasn't about a viral moment with a famous actor. It was about a girl who stood on a stage and sang anyway, and the world was listening. The world. Jenna's phone continued to buzz as messages poured in from old classmates, extended family, and even people she didn't know. Some were brief, just clapping emojis or heart reactions. Others were long paragraphs about personal struggles and how her performance had meant something more than just a song. One message stood out. It came from a girl named Talia who lived in another state. Jenna had never met her. The message read, "Hi, Jenna. I've been homeschooled for 2 years because of anxiety attacks. I saw your video today, and I cried the whole way through. Not because you sang perfectly, but because you kept going. I just wanted you to know that tonight I sang to my parents for the first time in forever. Thank you." Jenna read it twice, then pressed her phone to her chest, eyes filling again. But these weren't sad tears. These were something else. Something that felt like light. Downstairs, her mom called up to her voice, cheerful, "Honey, come down and see this. You're on the local news." Jenna grabbed a sweatshirt and padded downstairs in her slippers. Her dad stood by the TV, holding his coffee eyes wide with disbelief. On the screen was a news anchor in front of a screenshot from the video. The caption read, "Actor Keanu Reeves supports shy teen singer. Internet applauds moment of pure kindness." But even the reporter speaking live made it clear what mattered most. Yes, Keanu Reeves showed up at a small-town Texas high school and helped this young girl through a life-changing moment, she said. But the real story is Jenna Carter, 17 years old, battling anxiety and finding her voice under the most intense pressure. The footage is inspiring millions. Jenna's mom had tears in her eyes as she turned to her. "Baby, you're making people believe in themselves." Jenna didn't know how to respond. She wasn't used to being the center of attention, and she certainly wasn't used to being called brave. But something inside her settled with that truth. She didn't need to chase perfection. She had already touched something far more important. Later that afternoon, she received a call from her school counselor. The school had decided to host a roundtable for students who struggle with anxiety and self-expression. Jenna was invited to help lead it if and when she felt ready. She said yes without hesitation. She also received a voicemail from her music therapist, Mrs. Langley. "Jenna, I saw the video," her voice said, thick with emotion. "I'm not even sure I have the words, but you did it. You trusted the rhythm. You walked through it. I'm proud of you beyond words." That night, Jenna sat on the edge of her bed, No music playing, no distractions, just silence. And in that quiet, she whispered the lyrics again, just for herself. "So, darling, darling, stand by me." She wasn't afraid of her own voice anymore, because now she knew that sometimes all it takes is one note, one rhythm, and one person who chooses not to walk away. Jenna sat on her bed later that evening, the glow of her bedside lamp casting soft light across the room. The viral videos, the messages, the news segments, it all felt unreal. And as she sat there, letting the stillness settle, the memories she had carried for years began to surface in slow, painful waves. Her anxiety hadn't started in high school. It went back much further. She remembered the first time she froze in front of a group. She was 11 in the 6th grade, standing at the front of her English class with a note card shaking in her hand. She had practiced her book report for days, repeating the sentences until she could say them in her sleep. But when she looked up and saw 20 pairs of eyes staring at her, something inside her locked up. Her throat closed, her breathing stuttered, her vision blurred. The teacher urged her gently to continue, but she couldn't. Not a single word made it past her lips. She sat back down to a quiet room, but in her head it felt like breaking glass. Her classmates didn't laugh, but they whispered, and she heard enough of it to know she was different. From that day on, speaking in class became harder. Introducing herself on the first day of school made her panic. Reading aloud felt impossible. Every presentation, every group activity, every moment that required her voice felt like standing too close to a ledge. By 7th grade, the panic attacks had begun. At first, they came during stressful moments, tests, crowded hallways, surprise questions from teachers. But soon, they came without warning. During lunch, in gym class, on the bus ride home. Teachers didn't always understand. Some thought she was being dramatic. Others believed she just needed more confidence. A few gently encouraged her, but none truly knew what it felt like to wake up each morning, wondering when her own mind would betray her again. The turning point came when she was 14. She had locked herself in the school bathroom during a panic attack, struggling to breathe, trying to stay quiet so no one would hear her. A counselor found her and called her parents. That afternoon, she met with a specialist who finally gave her experience a name: social anxiety disorder. It didn't fix everything, but it changed how the adults around her saw her. Therapy started soon after, and near the end of her freshman year, her therapist suggested something unexpected: music therapy. Jenna had laughed at first, not because she found it funny, but because she couldn't imagine it helping. She could barely speak in front of people. How could she make music? But when she stepped into Mrs. Langley's music room for the first time, everything shifted. The room smelled of cedar and sheet music. There were guitars on the wall, a piano in the corner, and a small stack of lyric journals waiting to be filled. Mrs. Langley didn't ask her to sing on the first day. She didn't ask her to speak. Instead, she told Jenna to hum if she felt like it, or tap her fingers on the desk, or simply listen. Over months, Jenna began to hum softly. Then she sang single lines, then full verses. Music didn't solve her anxiety, but it gave her something she had never had before: a place where her voice didn't feel like a burden. And yet, as much as therapy helped, she still couldn't imagine performing for anyone. That truth hit her hard 2 years ago, the first time she saw a flyer for the Oak Ridge High talent show. She remembered holding it in her hands, reading the bold letters: "Do you have a talent to share? Sign up today." She had folded the paper once, twice, then thrown it into the trash before she reached the end of the hallway. Back then, she believed she would never be enough, not on a stage, not in front of anyone. She could never have imagined what would happen on that stage 2 years later. As Jenna continued reflecting, she remembered another moment from 2 years earlier, one that felt small at the time, but now seemed strangely meaningful. She had arrived early to school one morning, long before most students. The hallways were quiet, lit only by the soft glow of the overhead lights. She walked past the bulletin board outside the cafeteria and saw a teacher pinning up a new flyer. It was bright yellow, decorated with musical notes and stars. The teacher smiled at her and said, "You should try this. I've heard the way you hum in the mornings." Jenna felt her face flush. She hadn't known anyone heard her. She stared at the flyer once the teacher walked away. Her heart thudded painfully as she imagined herself standing in front of a crowd. The panic rose so quickly that she didn't even think. She tore the flyer down, crumpled it into her backpack, and threw it away during lunch. No one knew. Not her friends, not her parents, not Mrs. Langley. To her, that moment was proof that fear would always win. She never expected fear to loosen its grip 2 years later. But something had changed inside her since then. Therapy had slowly shifted her thinking. Music had softened the edges of her panic. And somewhere deep within her, a quiet part of her had begun to hope. Hope for one chance to be heard without falling apart. That hope was what made her sign up for the talent show this year. She didn't tell anyone at first. She didn't even believe she would go through with it. But she filled out the form and dropped it into the submission box before she could talk herself out of it. Even then, she was sure she'd fail. She never imagined that Keanu would be in the audience that night. She never imagined that he would stand up when she broke down. And she never imagined that her voice, shaky, imperfect, trembling, would become something people around the world would connect to. As she sat on her bed, replaying her past in quiet pieces, she realized something for the first time. Her story wasn't about the night she froze in 6th grade, or the panic attacks in 7th, or even the flyer she once threw away. Her story was about the moment she chose not to run anymore. Her story was about the night she finally found her voice. By the next morning, Jenna's world had expanded far beyond the walls of her small Texas town. Her phone notifications didn't slow down, they multiplied. She tried turning off her ringer, but the screen still lit up with every new alert. Her email inbox was even worse. She watched the numbers climb as messages poured in from strangers, supporters, music teachers, anxiety advocates, and journalists from outlets she had only seen on television. Her mother called her into the living room where her father was sitting with his laptop open, eyebrows raised. Jenna, he said, turning the screen toward her people from New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago, have emailed. They all want to talk to you. Jenna's legs felt weak as she sat down. Her father scrolled through the inbox, reading names she recognized. Morning shows, national magazines, digital platforms with millions of followers. They want to fly you out, he continued gently. Some want to interview you and Keanu together. They want to talk about what happened on stage. The moment he said Keanu's name, Jenna's breath hitched. It wasn't fear of him, it was fear of everything that came with him. Cameras, lights, thousands of eyes, the exact things that had once stopped her from speaking at all. I don't know if I can do that, she whispered. Her mother sat beside her. You don't have to do anything you're not ready for. Jenna nodded, but the knot in her chest tightened. She felt trapped between gratitude and panic, pulled in 2 directions at once. She knew these invitations were an honor, something people dreamed about, but all she could think about was freezing again. Not on a stage this time, but in front of a camera that would broadcast her fear to millions. The doorbell rang. Her father went to answer it, and a moment later, Keanu stepped inside the house with a quiet, warm smile. He looked the same as he had the night before, calm, grounded, unhurried. He held a small paper bag of pastries in one hand. Thought you might need breakfast, he said. Jenna managed a small smile. Thank you. They sat at the dining table as her parents gave them space. Jenna took a deep breath, gathering the courage to speak. They want interviews, she said softly. A lot of them. Keanu nodded. I figured they would. I don't think I can do them, she said. I barely handled one stage. I don't want to embarrass myself on TV. Keanu leaned back in his chair. You didn't embarrass yourself on that stage, he said. You showed up. That's more than most people do. Jenna looked down at her hands. But what if I freeze again? Then you freeze, he said gently. And you breathe. And you keep going. You don't owe anyone more than what you can give. She met his eyes. They were steady and full of quiet sincerity. You don't have to talk to everyone, he added. You choose who you trust. You choose the room where you feel safe. Jenna swallowed hard. Then I don't choose any of them? Keanu nodded. Then we won't do any of them. Before Jenna could respond, there was a soft knock on the open doorway. Evelyn Moore peeked in holding a folder and wearing the same gentle smile she had the night before. "I hope I'm not interrupting," she said. Jenna's mother waved her inside. "Please, come in." Evelyn stepped closer, giving Jenna a warm look. "I heard the news. Your story is spreading faster than wildfire in July." Jenna sighed, rubbing her forehead. "I don't know what to do. I'm not built for interviews." Evelyn sat down across from her. "Then don't do them. Or at least don't do the ones that scare you. There are other ways to share something meaningful." Jenna looked up. "Like what?" "Well," Evelyn said, tapping the folder gently, "the local station reached out to me this morning. They want to do a small segment. Something thoughtful, something gentle. I told them I'd only consider it if you were comfortable and if I could moderate the conversation." Jenna's breath caught. "You moderating, yes," Evelyn replied. "No bright lights, no large studio audience. Just you, me, a couple of soft lamps, and one camera operator who's been doing this job for 30 years. He's quieter than a church mouse." Jenna laughed softly at that. Keanu leaned forward. "That sounds like a safe place." Evelyn nodded. "And importantly, nobody is asking for drama. They want authenticity. They want to talk about anxiety, courage, music therapy, and what the moment meant to you, not because of celebrity involvement, but because people saw themselves in you." Jenna let the idea settle. She imagined a small room, not a studio. She imagined Evelyn's calm voice. She imagined not having to perform, not having to prove anything, just speaking. "I could do that," she whispered. "I think I could do that." Keanu smiled. "Then that's your answer? You pick the space where you can breathe." Jenna's mom touched her shoulder. "We'll be right there with you." Her father nodded. "You don't have to be anything you're not." Jenna took a slow, full breath. Not shaky this time, not tight. A real inhale. "Okay," she said finally. "Let's do the local interview." Evelyn clasped her hands together with relief. "Wonderful. I'll set it up for tomorrow afternoon. Don't worry about preparing anything. Just be yourself." Jenna hesitated. "What about the national interviews?" Keanu shrugged lightly. "They can wait. If they really care about your story, they'll understand." "And if they don't?" Jenna asked. "Then they never cared about you," Keanu said. "Only the moment." Jenna nodded slowly. It made sense in a way she hadn't expected. For the first time since the video went viral, she didn't feel overwhelmed. She felt grounded. She felt in control. And as she looked at both Keanu and Evelyn, two people who showed up for her when she needed it, she realized something she couldn't put into words. She didn't need to fear the world when she could choose which part of it to let in. The next afternoon, Jenna arrived at the local station with her parents, Keanu and Evelyn. The building wasn't large or intimidating. It looked more like a community center than a news studio, with soft lighting in the lobby and friendly faces behind the front desk. The calm atmosphere helped ease the tightness in Jenna's chest. The producer, a gentle man with silver hair named Robert, greeted them with a warm smile. "We're keeping things simple today," he said. "One camera, one mic, no pressure, just a conversation." Jenna nodded, grateful. She followed Evelyn into a small studio room that resembled a cozy reading corner rather than a set. Two chairs sat angled toward each other with a small lamp glowing softly beside them. A table held 2 glasses of water. There were no harsh lights, no big monitors, no bustling crew, just quiet. Keanu took a seat off to the side, close enough to show support, but far enough to keep the space feeling safe. Her parents sat behind the camera with Robert. Evelyn leaned toward Jenna. "Remember, we're just talking. If you need a minute, we pause. There's no timeline." Jenna breathed deeply. "Okay." The camera light blinked on. Evelyn began gently. "Jenna, thank you for being here. A lot of people have seen the video of you singing, but before that moment, there was a long journey. Tell us a little about it." Jenna looked down first, gathering her courage. Then she lifted her eyes. "For years, I was afraid of my own voice," she said quietly. "I had panic attacks in school. Speaking in front of anyone felt like climbing a mountain I couldn't see the top of. I thought something was wrong with me." Evelyn nodded. And when did you start to understand what you were experiencing? When I was 14, Jenna said. A counselor helped me figure out that I had social anxiety disorder. I didn't even know what that meant at the time. I just knew I felt broken. Evelyn's voice softened. What helped you begin healing music therapy? Jenna replied. Singing was the only time I felt steady. I could hum even when I couldn't speak. It gave me a way to breathe again. She paused, swallowing. But performing, I never thought I'd do that. Evelyn waited a beat, until the night of the talent show. Jenna smiled faintly. Right. I almost walked off stage, but then... Keanu stood up. The camera shifted slightly to include Keanu in the frame as he leaned forward. I saw someone trying, he said, and I know what that feels like. I know what it's like to freeze, to want to run. Jenna nodded. When he started playing, it felt like someone reached into the dark and handed me a light. Keanu smiled gently. Sometimes all someone needs is for another person to stay with them. Not fix it, not lead, just stay. The room stayed quiet for a moment, the weight of his words settling. Then Evelyn asked Jenna, what did singing that night mean to you? Jenna exhaled slowly. It meant I wasn't silent anymore. Evelyn leaned in slightly, sensing the shift in Jenna's voice. When you say you weren't silent anymore, what changed inside you in that moment? Jenna took a moment to search for the right words. For the first time, I didn't feel like my fear was the whole story. I was scared, yes, but I kept going. I didn't think that was possible for someone like me. She looked down at her hands, then back up with a small but steady smile. I guess I learned that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing to move anyway. Evelyn nodded thoughtfully. A lot of young people watching this today feel that same fear. Many of them believe they'll never be able to speak up or sing or even raise their hand in class. What would you want to say to them? Jenna hesitated at first, the old instinct to shrink back tugging at her. But then she remembered the stage, the bassline, the feeling of pushing through. She lifted her chin slightly. I want them to know they're not broken, she said softly. Fear doesn't mean you're weak. It means you care. It means you're trying. And even if your voice shakes, even if it takes everything in you just to whisper, that still counts. Keanu watched her with quiet pride. Evelyn turned toward him next. Keanu, you've become an unexpected part of this story. What made you stand up that night? He paused, choosing his words carefully. I saw someone standing exactly where I once stood, frozen, overwhelmed, wanting to disappear. He glanced toward Jenna. And I know how much it matters when someone chooses to stand with you instead of watching from afar. Jenna's parents exchanged a glance, moved by the clarity and gentleness in his voice. Evelyn continued. You said earlier that being present is sometimes the greatest gift. Can you explain that for viewers? Presence means listening, Keanu said. It means not rushing someone past their pain or trying to solve it. It means saying, I'm here. Keep going. You're not alone. Most of us think we need big gestures to make a difference. But that night, all it took was a bass line, a rhythm to lean on. Robert, the cameraman, blinked rapidly, eyes glossy. Evelyn turned back to Jenna. When the clip aired, people were struck by your honesty. How has life changed since Jenna let out a soft breath? I've gotten hundreds of messages. Teens who said they haven't spoken in class for a year. Kids who said singing scares them, but they want to try. People telling me they finally feel seen. She wiped one tear from her cheek and let the others fall. I never thought my voice could go that far. Evelyn reached over and squeezed her hand. Sometimes the quietest voices echo the longest. Robert signaled softly that the segment was ending. Evelyn closed with a warm smile. Thank you both for your bravery and your hearts. This conversation will stay with a lot of people. When the recording light clicked off, the room remained still full of emotion, full of truth, full of something that felt larger than any interview. Jenna inhaled once more, letting the piece settle. For the first time, she didn't fear being heard. 3 days after the interview aired, Jenna was sitting at the kitchen table, still trying to catch up on messages she hadn't found the courage to read yet. Her parents were making breakfast, the house quiet, except for the soft clinking of dishes. Then the doorbell rang. Her father wiped his hands on a towel and went to answer it. Jenna heard a familiar voice and glanced up just as Keanu stepped inside, carrying an envelope. He greeted her with a warm nod and handed it to her. "This came through a foundation I work with," he said. "I thought it should go directly to you." The envelope was white and simple, stamped with a small golden emblem. Jenna turned it over, feeling a flutter of curiosity mixed with a hint of dread. She opened it carefully. Inside was a letter printed on thick parchment-like paper. She began to read silently. "Dear Jenna Carter, your story has touched many hearts, including ours. We would be honored to invite you to participate in the Horizon Youth Music Program in Los Angeles." Her breath caught. She kept reading. "A gathering dedicated to young singers who face emotional or physical challenges. Here, they support one another, create music together, and learn from mentors who understand their journeys. This is not a competition. It is a safe, encouraging space for voices like yours." Jenna's hands trembled slightly as she held the letter. She read it again slowly, making sure she hadn't misunderstood any part of it. Los Angeles, a youth program, young singers with challenges like hers. She looked up at Keanu, her eyes wide. "This is real." "It's very real," he said gently. "The foundation tries to stay out of the spotlight. They work quietly, carefully." "I thought it might be something meaningful for you." Her mother stepped closer, reading over Jenna's shoulder. "This is incredible," she whispered. But Jenna wasn't smiling. Not yet. Her stomach twisted with a familiar fear, the idea of traveling, meeting strangers, singing again, and possibly failing in front of people she'd never met. "I don't know if I can do this," she said softly. Her father walked closer, resting a gentle hand on her back. "Honey, this isn't like a competition. There's no pressure." Keanu nodded. "It's a place where kids who've struggled find each other, where they're allowed to be human, to grow at their own pace." Jenna set the letter on the table and stared at it. "But it's so far away, and I've barely stood on one stage." Her mother knelt beside her, taking her hands. "You stood on a stage you once thought was impossible. You faced a fear you thought would own you forever." Jenna swallowed hard. Her mom squeezed her hands a little tighter. "Why not see what the next stage looks like? You don't have to be fearless. You just have to keep moving." Jenna looked at the letter again, reading the words quietly in her mind. A gathering. Supportive. Safe. Not about being the best, just being herself. She took a long, deep breath. Jenna folded the letter slowly, smoothing the edges as if trying to understand the weight of what she was holding. 2 months, she whispered. "That's not a lot of time." Her mother sat beside her. 2 months is enough to prepare, enough to grow, enough to breathe, her father added, and enough to decide without pressure. Keanu stepped forward a little. "Jenna, nobody expects anything from you. Not the foundation, not the kids you'll meet. The point isn't to perform perfectly. The point is to show up as you are. You've already learned that your voice matters even when it shakes." Jenna pressed her lips together, thinking. "I'm scared," she admitted. He nodded. "Good. That means it matters." She let out a soft laugh, the kind that comes from disbelief mixing with relief. "What if I embarrass myself? What if I can't sing there? What if I panic?" And Keanu raised a hand gently. "Then someone will help you keep the beat, just like you did that night. You won't be alone." Her mother leaned closer, her voice warm. "Honey, you once threw away a flyer for our tiny little hometown talent show because you didn't think you belonged." She brushed Jenna's hair behind her ear. "And now, a national music program is inviting you because you showed the world exactly who you are." Jenna felt something in her chest loosen slowly, carefully, like a knot she'd been carrying was starting to unwind. She looked at the letter again. So much of her life had been shaped by fear, from 6th grade panic attacks to avoiding eye contact in hallways to humming alone in therapy rooms. And yet somehow, her quiet bravery had traveled farther than she ever imagined. "What if I'm not ready?" she asked. Evelyn, who had just stepped into the house after receiving a text from Jenna's mother, answered softly from the doorway. "Readiness is overrated. Willingness is what changes lives." Jenna turned. "You think I should go?" Evelyn smiled. "I think you've already proven you can stand on a stage. Now it's time to stand in a room full of people who understand what it took for you to get there." Jenna breathed in deeply again, slow, steady, fuller than before. And as the air filled her lungs, she felt something stronger than fear begin to rise. Possibility, hope, a sense of becoming. She held the letter close to her chest. "Okay," she said quietly at first, then louder. "Okay, I'll go." Her mother wrapped her arms around her, whispering, "I'm so proud of you." Keanu gave her a small nod, the same steadying gesture he had given her on stage. "You're choosing your story," he said. Evelyn stepped forward, touching Jenna's shoulder. "And you're going to change others just like you already have." Jenna smiled through the emotions gathering in her eyes. 2 months, she said again. "I guess that's enough time to grow into this." And for the first time, she didn't say it with fear. She said it with belief. The night before Jenna was set to leave for Los Angeles, the Carter household felt unusually quiet. Suitcases sat open in the living room, half packed with clothes, lyric notebooks, and the small charm bracelet her grandmother once gave her. Jenna paced slowly between the kitchen and the hallway, trying to calm the swirl of emotions rising in her chest. As the sun dipped below the horizon, there was a gentle knock on the front door. Jenna's father opened it, revealing Keanu standing there with a soft smile and a bass case resting against his shoulder. "Thought I'd stop by before she leaves," he said. Her father's expression warmed. "Come on in. She's been thinking a lot." Keanu nodded, stepping inside the familiar home one more time before Jenna's journey began. Jenna appeared from the hallway, eyes lighting up in quiet surprise. "You came," she said. "Wouldn't miss it," he replied. Jenna's mother brought out a tray of tea, placing it on the coffee table, before settling beside her husband. The atmosphere was warm, intimate, a family gathered not out of ceremony, but out of shared tenderness. Keanu set the bass case down and glanced at Jenna. "Do you feel like singing?" he asked gently. Jenna hesitated, not out of fear, but out of the fragile mix of anticipation and nostalgia. "Yeah," she said softly. "I think I do." Her father retrieved her small practice microphone from the shelf, the one she used during therapy sessions and late-night rehearsals. Jenna sat on the arm of the couch, and Keanu took his place across from her, tuning the bass with delicate practice motions. The room fell into a hushed stillness. Keanu plucked the first note. Warm, low, familiar. Jenna closed her eyes, letting the vibration settle in her chest. She began humming first, allowing the melody to find its place under her ribs. It was the same song they had performed together the night she found her courage, "Stand By Me." But here in her living room, it sounded different, softer, more personal. Not a performance, a letting go. Keanu played the steady rhythm, his fingers brushing effortlessly across the strings. Jenna followed her voice, coming out calm, clear, and almost weightless. Her father sat back in his chair, hands folded. His eyes glistened with emotion he tried to hide. He remembered the years Jenna had struggled to even speak in crowded grocery stores, the mornings she cried before school, the afternoons she came home defeated by fear. And now she was preparing to leave home for a music program in another state. His daughter was singing, not trembling, not folding inward, not breaking, singing. He wiped the corner of his eye, hoping no one noticed. But Jenna did. She offered him a small smile mid-verse, and it nearly broke him open. Keanu watched the exchange with gentle understanding, as though he knew exactly what it meant for a parent to see their child reclaim something they once lost. The song continued, filling the house with a tenderness that felt almost sacred. Each note carried the story of a girl who once hid from her own voice and who now stood on the edge of becoming someone new. When the last chords of "Stand By Me" faded into the warm stillness of the living room, Keanu let his hand linger on the final note. Jenna held her breath as the sound drifted away, leaving behind a quiet that felt full, instead of empty. She opened her eyes and looked around the room. Her mother's hands were clasped near her heart. Her father was blinking fast, trying to hide the shine in his eyes. And Keanu sat across from her with the patient expression of someone who understood the power of a moment more than most people ever would. Jenna rested the microphone in her lap. "I haven't felt this calm before a big change," she said softly. Her father cleared his throat. "It's because you're ready," he said. "More ready than you think." Jenna smiled, but she felt a familiar flutter of nerves stirring under her ribs. "Can we do one more?" she asked. "Just one song." Keanu nodded immediately. "You pick it." She thought for a second, then stood and walked to her music folder on the shelf. She pulled out a small sheet of handwritten lyrics, something she and Mrs. Langley had worked on months ago, a simple ballad full of long notes that once scared her. She returned to her place on the couch and held the page gently. "This one," she said. "I've never sung it all the way through." Keanu adjusted his bass, listening closely as she hummed the key. Then he began to play slow and subtle, giving her room to breathe. The melody started soft, low in her throat. She closed her eyes again, letting the music lift her. As she reached the second verse, her voice grew stronger, carrying a steady tone that filled the room. Her father watched in awe. The last time she had attempted this song, she had stopped halfway through her breath, locking her voice breaking. But tonight was different. Tonight she wasn't battling the song, she was following it. Keanu gave her a small nod during the bridge, like a tiny signal of encouragement. She responded with a breath that anchored her chest and steadied her tone. Then came the final line, the note she had always feared, the one that sat just slightly above her comfort zone. She lifted her chin, inhaled slowly, and reached for it. The note rang out, full, clear, held without trembling. Her mother let out a soft gasp. Her father covered his mouth with one hand, overwhelmed. Even Keanu paused his playing for half a second, a spark of pride passing through his expression before he returned to the bass line. When the last chord faded, Jenna lowered the microphone, a stunned smile forming across her face. "I hit it," she whispered. Her mother rushed forward and wrapped her arms around her. Her father followed, holding them both. Keanu watched with quiet warmth, hands resting gently on his bass. "You didn't just hit it," he said. "You owned it." Jenna looked at all three of them, a soft glow in her eyes. Tomorrow she would leave for Los Angeles. Tonight she had found her voice again, stronger than ever. The Los Angeles summer air was warm as Jenna stepped out of the shuttle that brought the youth program participants to the performance hall. The building was small but elegant, designed more for intimacy than spectacle. Its glass doors reflected the evening light, and inside soft music drifted through the lobby. Young singers, some in wheelchairs, some wearing sensory headphones, some clutching notebooks, the way Jenna once had filled the space with nervous excitement. But Jenna wasn't nervous. Not tonight. She held her music folder close to her chest, feeling steady rather than shaky. 2 months of the program had changed her more than she could have imagined. There had been days when old fears crept back, days she struggled to speak in group sessions, days she doubted herself. But there had also been breakthroughs, soft, slow growth that built something real within her. Now, as she walked toward the backstage area, her steps felt grounded. She wasn't floating with fear or shrinking from the moment. She was present. A program coordinator handed her the set list and whispered, "You're the second to last performer. Take your time. This showcase is about sharing, not judging." Jenna nodded and smiled. "Thank you." She made her way behind the curtain where students waited with sheet music guitars or just their breath. She recognized faces she had gotten to know well, Leah, who trembled every time she introduced herself, but sang like an angel. Mateo, who communicated primarily through music, and Sarah, whose stutter vanished the moment she touched the piano keys. They all smiled at her. She smiled back. "You ready?" Leah whispered. "Yeah," Jenna said. "I think I am." As the showcase began, voices rose and fell in the hall. The audience didn't clap to impress, they clapped to encourage, to uplift, to honor every brave note. Jenna listened from backstage as each performer shared a piece of their heart. It didn't feel competitive. It felt like community. When the coordinator finally whispered, "Jenna, you're next," she breathed in deeply. The old flutter of nerves flickered under her ribs, but instead of tightening her chest, it energized her. She stepped toward the stage entrance and paused. Standing in the dim light of the wing, leaning casually against a support beam, was Keanu. He had arrived quietly, slipping in through a side door, so the event remained centered on the youth performers. He didn't wave or call out. He simply nodded the same warm, steady nod he had given her the night she first found her courage. Jenna felt her breath deepen. "You okay?" Keanu asked softly. She nodded. "More than okay." He smiled. "Go show them who you are." The coordinator lifted the curtain gently. Jenna walked out onto the stage. The spotlight found her instantly, but for the first time in her life, she didn't shrink from it. She stepped into it, glowing. The soft light warmed Jenna's face as she walked to the center of the stage. The audience was filled with families, mentors, and students who understood how much courage it took to stand exactly where she stood. No one stared with judgment. No one whispered. Instead, their eyes were open, gentle, and ready to receive whatever she shared. For a brief moment, she closed her eyes, letting the stillness settle around her. She felt her heartbeat not fast, not panicked, but steady. A rhythm she recognized, a rhythm she once relied on. She opened her eyes again and smiled into the light. "Hi," she said softly. Her voice didn't waver. "My name is Jenna. I'm here to sing a song I wrote during the program. It's about finding yourself when you thought you were lost." The room was quiet the way people get quiet when something important is about to happen. A gentle piano introduction began, one she had arranged with the program's accompanist. Jenna held the microphone loosely, taking one last breath before the first verse. Then she sang. Her voice rose with a warmth that surprised even her. It wasn't just steady, it was golden, clear, vulnerable in the most beautiful way. The melody floated through the room like a soft breeze carrying the truth of her journey. Every lyric reflected a piece of her past. The fear, the silence, the moment she almost walked away, the hand that helped her stay, the courage she found in herself afterward. She didn't try to impress anyone. She didn't force a single note. She simply let her heart speak through her voice. And the audience felt it. Every person in that room felt the honesty, the bravery woven into each line. Backstage, Keanu watched through a narrow opening between the curtains. His arms were folded loosely, his expression soft with pride. He didn't want recognition. He didn't need it. This moment belonged to her. As Jenna reached the chorus, her voice grew stronger. "Now I stand where shadows used to be, and I'm learning what it means to really breathe. I was quiet. I was broken. I was small, but I'm singing now, and I'm not afraid to fall." A few audience members wiped tears from their eyes. The words weren't polished or theatrical. They were true. True in a way that cut through noise and expectation and reached straight into the tender places people usually kept hidden. Jenna continued her confidence building note by note. Her eyes shone under the spotlight, but not with fear, with light. Something inside her had shifted. The girl who once trembled at a microphone had stepped into herself completely. When she approached the final verse, she lifted her chin with a quiet certainty. This verse was the hardest, the one she once struggled to sing during rehearsals, because it felt too honest. "I thought my voice was something I had lost, a fragile thing too easily undone. But now I see that courage isn't loud. Courage is choosing to be found." She held the final word, letting it bloom into the air. Then came the last note, the highest one in the entire song, a note she had once avoided, a note she had once believed she wasn't worthy of. She reached for it and hit it, clear, strong, effortless. The audience rose to their feet in a wave of applause that washed over the stage like warm sunlight. Jenna lowered the microphone, her eyes filling not with fear, but with gratitude. She bowed her head lightly, overwhelmed by the love surrounding her. Backstage, Keanu closed his eyes for a moment, letting the sound of her triumph sink in. Jenna stepped back from the mic as the applause continued, and for the first time in her life, she wasn't surprised by her own strength. She expected it. She trusted it. She owned it. The spotlight no longer frightened her. It belonged to her. Jenna sat by the window of her room in Los Angeles, the night after the showcase, the moonlight stretching across her notebook. Her voice was still warm from the performance, her chest still full from the applause. Sleep wouldn't come, not because she was restless, but because she finally felt something she had waited years to feel. Peace. She opened a fresh page in her journal. At the top, she wrote 4 simple words. Dear younger me, age 14. She paused, letting her breath steady, then continued writing. Each line flowed out of her with a clarity she had never felt before. Right now you think something is wrong with you, she wrote. You think the shaking in your hands, the tightness in your chest, and the moments you can't breathe make you broken. You think the silence in your throat means you don't belong anywhere. She swallowed, her eyes softening. But I want you to know something. You're not broken. You're not weak. You're not less than the others. You're a girl with a voice you haven't heard yet. She set the pen down for a moment, breathing in the calm of her small room. Then she picked it up again. You won't believe this now, but one day you'll stand on a stage and sing. You'll shake at first. You'll freeze. You'll panic. But someone will step up to help you. Someone you never expected, and he won't try to save you. He'll simply stand with you. Her mind drifted to the moment Keanu walked onto the school stage. His calm presence, his steady rhythm, the way he didn't push her, didn't pressure her, didn't speak over her. He'll play a bass guitar behind you, she wrote, steady, patient, forgiving. And that rhythm will be the thing that keeps you from walking away. You'll find your voice in its warmth. She took another breath, deeper this time. I want you to remember something. Healing isn't loud. It isn't dramatic. It doesn't happen in one perfect moment. Sometimes healing sounds like a soft bass line, one slow note at a time, telling you keep going, keep breathing, keep trying. Her pen moved more confidently now. And then one day you won't need that steady rhythm behind you. You'll make your own. You'll walk onto new stages without shaking. You'll hold notes you used to be terrified of, and the world will hear the girl you tried so hard to hide. Jenna stopped writing for a moment and closed her eyes. She could almost picture her 14-year-old self, small, scared, hunched over a bathroom sink, trying to breathe through another panic attack. She imagined kneeling beside that girl. You survive this, she whispered aloud. She returned to the page. You survive, and then you grow. And one day you will help someone else survive too. She signed the letter with a small flourish, Love your future voice. Then she closed the journal gently, holding it to her chest, as if holding her younger self in her arms. The next morning, sunlight filled Jenna's room as she prepared for her final day at the youth program. She tucked the letter into her journal and placed it inside her suitcase. As she zipped the bag, she felt lighter, like she had finally returned something her younger self had been waiting to hear. Later that afternoon, the entire program gathered for a closing ceremony. There were hugs, promises to stay in touch, swapped phone numbers, and teary goodbyes. Jenna felt a bittersweet ache in her chest. These were the first strangers she had ever felt safe around. People who understood what shaking hands meant, what long pauses meant, what courage looked like from the inside out. After the ceremony, the coordinators invited the participants to a backstage tour of the main auditorium, one of the larger halls where professionals sometimes performed. The room was quiet, with rows of empty seats stretching into the dim distance. Jenna walked slowly through the wings, touching the heavy curtains that smelled faintly of dust and history. As she reached the back corner of the stage, she noticed a girl sitting alone on a folding chair. She was small, maybe 12, with dark curls and a notebook clutched tightly to her chest. Her knees were pulled to her chest, and every few seconds she wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her hoodie. Jenna approached gently. Hey, she said softly. Mind if I sit with you? The girl shook her head, so Jenna sat beside her, letting a quiet moment settle. After a minute, The girl whispered, "I was supposed to sing today." "But I couldn't. I froze. They told me it was okay, but I feel stupid." Jenna's heart tugged. She saw her younger self reflected so clearly in the girl's trembling voice. "You're not stupid," Jenna said. "You're scared. That's different." The girl hugged her notebook tighter. "Everyone else did so good. I couldn't even stand up." Jenna took a slow breath, remembering how it felt to stand on a stage with her throat closed and her mind spinning. "I used to freeze too," she said. "I used to think it meant I wasn't meant for stages at all." The girl looked up surprised. "But you sang last night? Everyone said you were amazing." Jenna smiled gently. "I wasn't always that way. Do you know what helped me?" "Someone stood behind me and kept a steady rhythm until I could breathe again." The girl blinked. "Like music, like support," Jenna said. "Sometimes it sounds like music. Sometimes it sounds like a friend. Sometimes it sounds like a deep breath someone reminds you to take." The girl's eyes grew watery again. "What if I never find my voice?" Jenna shook her head. "You will. Maybe not today, maybe not next week, but you will. And when you do, it'll be yours, not perfect, not loud, but honest. And that's enough." The girl looked down, thinking, "Do you really believe that?" "Yes," Jenna said, "because I've lived it." She reached over and gently touched the girl's hand. "And when you're ready to try again, I'll be right here." The girl breathed out shakily, but this time it didn't break her voice, it steadied it. Jenna smiled, realizing something profound. She was now the steady rhythm for someone else. She had become the voice she once needed. The night air in Los Angeles felt gentle as Jenna stepped outside the auditorium after the final showcase. Her voice still echoed faintly inside the hall, lingering in the warm glow of the applause she had received. She stood at the edge of the walkway, hands tucked into her sweater sleeves, breathing in the calm that followed everything she had overcome. It wasn't the kind of calm that felt empty. It was the kind that filled her with a softness she had never known before, a quiet confidence that settled slowly and deeply. She thought of the path that had led her here, a small stage in Texas, a trembling microphone, a moment when every fear she had ever known threatened to swallow her in front of an entire room, and then a steady rhythm rising behind her, a calm presence standing up when everyone else stayed seated. A man who didn't try to save the show or fix the moment, but instead chose to accompany her through it. Jenna's eyes drifted upward to the stars. It amazed her that a single act of kindness could stretch so far into someone's life. Keanu hadn't known her. He owed her nothing. Yet the choice he made that night changed the arc of her story in a way she still struggled to comprehend. It wasn't dramatic or loud. It wasn't the kind of gesture people wrote headlines about, even though they eventually did. It was something quieter, a small, steady offering of support. As she walked through the courtyard outside the auditorium, she passed a group of parents hugging their children, encouraging them, praising their courage. She heard soft laughter from some of the other teens who had performed, their voices bright and free. A few waved to her, telling her she sounded incredible. She thanked them, but inside she knew something even more meaningful had happened. She had not just fought fear, she had stepped into a version of herself she thought she might never meet. Later that night, after the final goodbyes were said and the hall lights dimmed one by one, Jenna found herself sitting alone on a bench across from the program building. She took out her phone and scrolled through a few messages from her parents telling her how proud they were. She smiled softly. She had spent so many years believing she was a disappointment too fragile for the world, too anxious to move forward. Now she felt herself opening like a window, letting possibilities in. It wasn't long before footsteps approached. She looked up and saw Keanu walking toward her, holding a motorcycle helmet in one hand. He stopped a few feet away, giving her a small, gentle smile. It was the same smile he had given her on that stage in Texas, the one that had told her she didn't have to be perfect. She only had to be real. "You did something brave tonight," Keanu said. Jenna shook her head lightly. "I just sang." He sat down beside her. "You stood in front of fear and chose to move anyway. Most people never get that far." Jenna looked at the ground, her voice quiet. I used to think bravery was loud, but now I think it might be quiet instead. Keanu nodded. Most of the good things are. She let the silence settle between them. It didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt like a shared understanding, a kind of peace that didn't need explaining. A soft breeze carried across the courtyard, lifting a strand of Jenna's hair as she looked out at the quiet street. The evening felt peaceful, almost sacred. She could still feel the echo of the music she had shared earlier, not just in her voice, but somewhere deeper. Somewhere she used to guard with fear. Now it felt open in a way that surprised her. Keanu stood slipping his helmet over his arm. He looked toward the horizon where the last traces of daylight were fading into soft amber. "You're going to help a lot of people," he said. "More than you realize." Jenna rose, slowly, uncertain. "Do you really think so?" He nodded. "You're proof that fear doesn't get the final say. People need to see that, especially the ones who feel invisible." She let the words sink in. For so long she had been one of those invisible people hiding in corners and hallways, praying no one would notice her shaking hands. Now she felt noticed in a way that didn't terrify her. It felt grounding. It felt real. Before leaving, Keanu turned back to her with a thoughtful expression. "One day, someone else will need what you needed that night. And when that moment comes, you'll know exactly what to do." The idea settled in her heart like a seed ready to grow. Jenna watched him walk toward his motorcycle, parked near the sidewalk. He put on his helmet, adjusted the straps, and for a moment, the street lamp overhead cast a glow that made the scene feel timeless. Then the engine rumbled softly to life. He lifted one hand in a small wave, and she lifted her own in return. Without any grand farewell, without spotlight or announcement, Keanu rode away into the Texas night, just as quietly as he had walked onto that stage weeks before. She stood there for a long time, watching, until the sound faded. It struck her how some people leave an impact without ever trying to be seen. Sometimes the most powerful moments are the ones that happen quietly between two people who simply needed the same kind of hope at the same time. Months later, Jenna found herself backstage at another small event. A young girl stood near her, gripping a microphone with shaking hands. Her breathing was uneven. Her eyes kept darting toward the exit. Jenna walked over and gently sat beside her. "You don't have to be perfect," Jenna said softly. "You just have to begin." The girl looked up at her with wide, frightened eyes. "What if I mess up?" Jenna squeezed her hand. "Then you'll try again, and I'll be right here. I promise." As the girl nodded slowly, Jenna understood fully what Keanu meant. Kindness travels. It echoes. It grows. Have you ever had someone stand by you in a tough moment? Share it in the comments. And what story should Keanu be part of next? Let us know.